All right, lights, camera, action. The HBAR Bull, Brandon, welcome to the Impart podcast.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to hop on.
So you've recently launched your first creative NFT collection on Kabila, and you had a meteoric success, I'd say. I think that the community was happy to get behind you, and it's certainly encouraging for us to see the community getting behind creatives. And, someone might not consider a podcaster to be a creative per se, but they very much are. You've poured your life into creating content for the ecosystem for a long while. And I personally think it's one of the most positive and exciting things that a creative such as yourself has now found a way to, tokenize that service in a way, because it's like a very abstract service that you're offering the community. It's difficult to monetize something like that. And we know that ad revenue is just abysmal on most platforms. So it's really cool to see that. And I'm just interested to know, since your sellout, what has been happening? What have you been up to? And how is it engaging with your community of holders?
Well, I mean, it was a wild journey from the beginning. Of course, when I first shifted over careers into this space, I was just essentially working for the HBAR Foundation, and that fell through several months ago. So, I got some help from other people or entities in the ecosystem to kind of bridge me over. I didn't want to ask them again for help. I wanted to figure out how to do it, on my own, or find other avenues to get that. I started off with donations. Let's see if we can do this with donations, hoping that maybe there were some huge HBAR whales out there that would donate, and then I wouldn't have to bother anybody anymore. But then, and during that time, there were people suggesting you should do an NFT series. And at first I was like, you know what, that's putting an awful lot of burden on, NFT collectors specifically. And eventually, after, I got some traction with getting donations, but I saw that was not going to be able to take me through doing what I want to do in perpetuity. So I said, you know what, this makes sense. Talked to an artist and going through the idea of what a collection might look like. And that ideation and then nailing down what that art was going to be was an awesome experience. And he brought to reality so much more than I expected when I first started talking to him. First, we were looking at the PFPs, we were looking at some of the pixelated kind of art, and then we went in a completely different direction, which is like the hyper realistic, could be played by real actors in the real world if there was ever an HBAR, or a Bull Barbarian movie. So that was a blast, and then it was working and looking at the different tools we had in our ecosystem to, how do you bring this to market? And of course, these are all builders in the space that have their own products and are trying to make their own way in making these businesses sustain them and their teams. So it's teams like Kabila and KiloScribe and Galaxy and, on down the line, and certainly can't leave out Centex, which is the main secondary market. I want to do a launch with all of those entities except for Galaxy. They're a little bit different animal, but I want to do launches on these different networks across the board. And then it was, how am I going to bring value to this community and allow some of the vision that some of these teams have had around tokenizing your community, allow that to come to fruition and really, make it exciting and take it to the next level. And, to do that, first of all, the launch with Kabila was flawless. Of course, these NFTs, the Bulbarians, have already made it onto secondary markets. So Centex is getting some benefit from it. And then it was onto Galaxy. They had their worlds. You can create your own token gated world and have your own application icon on everybody's phone, just by having them send this NFT to their Galaxy account. So we did that, and I started putting out early content right away. The first thing was a CLSQ video, which has been highlighted by Paul Barron as recently as yesterday. We had the live shark bites at HederaCon. I did, went out there and wrestled Postmaster, another person, that NFT creator and a fighter in the space, in the Karate Combat Pit. I was able to put that out early. And the next step is, what else can we do? What else can we do with these token gated communities to really bring value to it? And, I liked the challenge early on because people were saying these NFTs aren't worth, the 400 HBAR that you're having people spend. And then that's like a challenge, right? You're like, you know what? I can bring that much value. The main thing, though, is that it's for the rest of the value that I try to bring to the ecosystem through all the interviews and all that kind of stuff. And then, set up a Web3 version of Patreon through the world. But now, because some people did say things like that, now I want to prove that I can not only bring that value, but additional value specific for the holders once they've gotten it. So it's been a fun ride to this point, and I'm looking forward to continuing with it in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting that people had that perspective, because when I think about, and we discussed this on the live space on X briefly, but when you think about Patreon, I mean, yes, you get benefits for various tiers, but you don't get anything tangible that even proves that you're getting those benefits besides your subscription, and you're paying money to see like behind the scenes content and maybe get a phone call. And so,
Sure.
and you're usually paying a monthly subscription to do that. You're not buying a once-off asset, right? And so you're probably going to end up spending more than, what was it, like how much was it in USD to buy one of your NFTs?
At the time, it was like maybe 82 or $84, someplace in that ballpark.
Wow, and people had an issue with that. I'm interested to know why you
Well,
thought that.
and I understand that. I understand why, people look at that and they say, well, you're minting 250 NFTs, you have a max supply over however many years of 5,000. I mean, that's a lot of money for a lot of people that are just breaking into the ecosystem or something along those lines. But there's tiers, right? There's people like that are just starting to come in, and they might try to do an NFT launch that only partially sells out. It's a struggle, right? And then there's people at the other side of the spectrum that might be getting paid right now hundreds of thousands of HBAR, per month at some of these official entities and things like that. So I'm looking up to them, and there's other people looking up to me, and people think things are unfair. But, I think it's the most fair if you can get somebody to take their hard-earned capital or their hard-earned HBAR and actually put that towards something like this. That way, that you're probably bringing that level of value. So having that sellout certainly made me feel good.
Yeah, I mean, value is such a almost intangible, abstract thing, right? But I mean, most NFTs, at least until now, until Hedera, have just been JPEG images with no promises behind them, except that, oh, we're going to have a community, and that community is going to grow, and maybe we'll have some brand partnerships, and that's like enough. So I just find it really strange that people were saying stuff like that. But I'm more interested to know, like, why did you feel that it was pressure on NFT collectors rather to like buy this?
Well, that it wasn't. It's of course the people that are going to be into this are people that are into collecting NFTs, right? But then since then, I've kind of taken a different tack. It's like, you know what? I can bring new people into the NFT space, possibly not even just from the Hedera ecosystem, but from outside as well, that might see this art, which, and this goes completely to the artist, is absolutely beautiful. I might be able to bring some of those people over from Solana and things like that. So now I feel that if I can truly bring value that way, I'm not just putting pressure on former Hedera NFT creators. I'm actually bringing other people in that might already be in the Hedera ecosystem, but I actually entice them to invest in their first NFT. Or people, like I mentioned, from outside the ecosystem, bring them in because these are really different and fun to play with. So that's how I'm looking at it now, and that's certainly my goal.
I don't want to get too esoteric, but you have been in a field which is kind of very factual and formal for a long while. You've also been a ship captain before. I wouldn't necessarily call the things that you do imaginatively creative in that sense. I think that they're quite informative and information based. So like, how does it feel to step into the world of like art and creativity for you?
It is. I mean, creating a podcast like this, you're right. It's meant to be educational, meant to be informative, entertaining, but not necessarily pure art. But there is certainly that creative twist to it. I do think it's important to stay engaging, to have a lot of overlays, and the more kind of things like with gaming that I can get the art that's being created by other people and incorporate that into my podcast and make it that much more engaging for the watcher. I think that's really important. Now, I'm far from an artist myself when it comes to that kind of stuff, but there is I guess, a satisfaction to creating something every Sunday and putting it out and getting the feedback. So, it's certainly, I'm a creator. There's no question about that. But there is a broad difference between me and necessarily a traditional artist. But it is fun to be able to create things like that. And, I can be entertained by all kinds of other podcasts out there that have nothing to do with traditional art. But and that's what my goal is, to entertain and inform. So it's been fun getting to this point, and it's fun to see it evolve. I get feedback on a regular basis, and I try to improve my content just a little bit on, as things go on. And we were actually just talking about some of those things that I need to work on here before the show. It's just about time too, and it is with the content that I create. A lot of times it's more about getting it out in a timely manner than it is about making sure that it's perfect. Don't let the perfection be the enemy of the good. So I do try to make sure that content gets out in a fairly timely manner. But it's been fun to this point, and I can't wait to see what else Hedera has that I can cover in the future.
Yeah, there's definitely that balance between like getting content out. There's a lot of pressure on artists today. I'm really happy that you were able to raise something that can sustain you and actually allow you to be more creative now. How do you feel when you look at the collection?
Oh, I just look at the potential, the different things. I'm actually, right after this meeting, I'm hopping on with the artist to talk about other things that we can do. It's different than most of the other NFTs out there. I think there's so much value in, some of the memeable art out there. I'll give a huge shout out to, teams like the Dead Pixels, one of my favorite out there. To be able to have those memes thrown out and have those little characters, of course, that's invaluable. But this is just a little bit different, and I'm excited to see where it goes and how it can be used. One of the other things, and I mentioned this to Solo the other day, the CEO of Galaxy, is I've established a brand. I've taken 7 years to create this brand. I think my first video that I put out on Hedera was in 2018. So I have this brand. Now I have this fantastic art. There's so many creatives out there, so many artists out there. I want to almost look at some of these characters and lend that brand out to some of these other content creators who might create other kinds of art or can create other kinds of art with this, videos or video games, things like that. It can be difficult to build a brand and to get your in within the Hedera community and get that credit to be able to leverage some of the skills we have out there. So I kind of want to lend out my brand when it makes sense. And if there's anybody out there that, is interested in potentially doing something with the characters that they've seen, let me know. I'd love to collaborate and talk about it and try to bring more value to those content creators, and then also my brand and these NFTs for my NFT collectors. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it at this point.
Has anyone in your community reached out to you and said, we'd love to participate in helping you grow what you're doing and like be involved in it yet?
Small stuff, small conversations at HederaCon and things like that, but nothing locked down at this point. Right now, it's mainly the artist and I that are looking for ways like that. And then teams like Galaxy as well. They have all kinds of fantastic ideas, but that's more in around what their goal is, which is to empower the creator middle class, which I kind of am. So I'm a good example of potentially what can be done. But, we have to follow through and execute using some of those Galaxy tools to do it. But, then, of course, we have that platform as well. I want to work with those other creatives out there to be able to bring some more quality content to that world.
Because obviously, I mean, most successful YouTubers, and you are one. I mean, I was shocked to hear that you actually edit everything yourself, and, most successful YouTubers have a video editor in the least. And I mean, I would imagine that there's somebody in that community of yours that you've tokenized now that would be honored to help you with that process. And it could free up so much time for you. And that's not advice from me. It's just an observation. And I think that's the joy of like that collaborative element in the ecosystem of like shared worlds, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, there's no question about that. There's, for some reason, I don't want to give up the editing portion, and a lot of that is if there was an editor that could, right after I record the content, I can get it to them and they can get it right back to me, so I can use it if it's necessary. That would be amazing, but there is something keeping that in your back pocket when you can go ahead and do that at yourself and knock it out in a few hours and then have access to it. And it's done to the quality and the way you want. But then again, there are professional editors out there that can do a lot better job than I can. One of the first things that you asked me was, why do you use that black background? Well, it's easy, right? I just do it because it's simple and easy, and that's one of the things that I kind of want to improve for the production quality is do some other things, but. I think it's good to have those skills around Premiere Pro and the editing software and build those over time, and then you can't lose that. And I'm also kind of scraping by, right? So video editors cost money, not a lot, and I could certainly afford it. But for some reason, I just don't want to give up that control.
um, I guess I can understand that as a creator myself, and having that control, especially for you, because the information that you put out is so important and your understanding of that information is pivotal. But I'm interested to see how it all progresses with time. There is one artist that you've collaborated with so far, though, and that is this rather elusive, mysterious artist who created the artworks. I really want to know, why did they choose to remain anonymous?
I think they just, and you know what, I'm gonna have to ask him again. I think he is willing to go out there and put his face out there. I think it's just he wanted the focus to be on me initially, but he certainly deserves all the credit in the world, and I hope we can continue the collaboration going forward. But I think he'll eventually come out and let everybody know who he is. It is somebody in the Hedera space, and this allows him because of course I give him some of the proceeds from the sales, and it takes some of the burden off the other business he has going on in the Hedera space. A little bit extra income from another source, so he can do some of the other stuff that he really enjoys.
That's cool. I want to just hop back to that topic of collaboration. You mentioned that I wouldn't say criticized, but I brought up the fact that you had Square videos, and you also brought up the fact that, why are we doing this on Zoom? And then you mentioned Riverside. And, it's something that was working for me. And I thought, hey, well, it's probably time to upgrade now because this podcast is starting to gain some traction at least. And it's that element of discussion around collaboration that I just love. And I see in the Hedera ecosystem this spirit of collaboration that is like probably the most underrated tool in the world. So I really hope that we see more of this. And I encourage that artist to reveal themselves and to get more involved, because I'm sure that many other people would contract them to do similar work, because these NFTs that you have created are fantastic. Moving on to Galaxy, you said you've been using it obviously for your token gated world/community. How are you finding it? What are your favorite features, and what are you hoping for in the future of Galaxy? And are you in touch with the team in any way? Do you have any insider juicy scoops for us on what's to come that you can share?
They're always knocking stuff out. So Galaxy generally is, a social media type platform, and I know they'll argue with that, but it does have an X feel right off the bat. You have posts, things like that. You can put out media content, pictures, videos, all that kind of stuff. No issues as far as considering, it's a relatively small team compared to something like X or Facebook. No issues with putting large content. I've put half-hour videos on there with no issue. And then there's a chat room where I have a general chat set up for mine, and then you can have DMs as well. The difference being the Web3 element. So you have your wallet right there down in the corner. Right now, people can set up their own token-gated world. So, of course, you have to have that Hedera NFT to be able to get into my world. But I'm also involved with worlds that are completely open, like KC Social. So that's the Karate Combat world. And yes, I am in contact with them on a regular basis. Right now, somebody can set up their own token-gated world, but they would need that NFT beforehand. And since I was doing a fair mint with my NFTs, I wasn't going to get an NFT until the mint. And I didn't even have a guarantee that I was going to get one because I was competing against everyone else. Luckily, I did manage to get one of those NFTs, but I wanted to kind of get it set up beforehand. So I worked with the Galaxy team to set it up, make me an administrator beforehand, because I wanted to make sure I had some content in there right off the bat. And I put that CLSQ, Transactional Internet of Things interview on there that posted a few days after I had it open in the world. The thing that I'm excited about, was talking to Chad there at ETH Denver and at HBARBARIANS, is they're just excited to try new things to fulfill their goal. As I mentioned, they're trying to empower that creator middle class. So that's me. So I kind of get to act like a guinea pig, but also it's fun to be the guinea pig, especially when you get to request exactly what you want. And they'll kind of do things and cater things to me because they know this is a good test bed for what might be possible in the future. So, I've talked to them about, I want to, be a little bit more interactive. So possibly live streams and being able to interact with the community that way. But, we're Web3. We want to do Web3 things. So, token drops and things like that. I just want to explore all the things you can do. And we're just scratching the surface. Like, it was intuitive to do a token gated world. Of course, now I want to do little competitions in there and drop tokens to people. But we're just scratching the surface. There's so many other things you can do. And that's what I'm excited about with Galaxy is I have a team that I get to kind of work with personally to create this world and fulfill the vision of, both them empowering the creator middle class, but also teams like Kabila who wanted to see what they could do with tokenizing brands and things along those lines. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah. You mentioned a fair launch now with your NFT collection and that you could only mint at the launch. How do you have a treasury of like any NFTs that you were able to mint for yourself that you can like use for rewarding people with later down the line?
Yeah. So, the NFTs, I think this is important for fungible tokens and NFTs. I think that the creators need to value them the same way they want other people to value them. So doing things like keeping some or taking some for free, I didn't want to do that. I did manage to grab a few. The reason why I wanted to grab a few extra is because I wanted to make sure that there was a secondary market. So I did list those on Centex right after I got them, except for a couple that I wanted to hold on to myself, for personal reasons and all that kind of stuff. As far as bringing value to the community later on, I don't want to promise anything. Certainly, I might do some things in the future as far as giveaways, but I kind of want to do that with the other brands in the space. Like, work with the brands that might have fungible tokens or NFTs and again lend them my brand and figure out how we can bring value back to whatever they're working on. So that's kind of what I want to focus on. If I start giving away the NFTs, my own the Bulbarian NFTs, it feels like I'm lowering the value in some way. So, I want to make sure that it works for whoever is giving up some of that value. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it at this point. I will say for the next mint, there is going to be some whitelists, and this is going to be very rare. But as I mentioned, I had some donations early on. So for anybody that donated an amount that's equal to the cost of one of these NFTs, I am going to give them a whitelist so they can get one for free. Anybody who donated less than that amount, I'm going to give them a whitelist so they can have first crack at minting one for the next mint. But besides that, I'm not going to do a lot of whitelists in the future. I'm just going to do regular sales and just try to bring value to them after the fact, either with that early content, with working with other teams, and so forth. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now.
That's really cool. Thanks in advance for the free slot, by the way. You mentioned that content creators are expensive. That's actually why I asked, because, and I think we haven't even like scratched the surface also of like how we can tokenize our communities yet. Because, I mean, and once again, I'm not in any way kind of telling you what I think that you should do, but I can't help but think, wow, like imagine in this next mint, because obviously if you're increasing the supply and you're adding more NFTs into circulation, it's not increasing scarcity per se. However, once again, I'm sure there would be people in your community who would like love to work with you if you offered them one of the future NFTs or one of the NFTs that you had reserved, and then you said, oh, you're scraping by. But it's like, well, wait a second, I can create more NFTs that people genuinely want, and I know they want them because they already bought them. And that actually increases the scarcity. So I think there are a lot of things that we haven't like explored yet in terms of tokenization. And I think that's a really nice pivot into like Kabila and how you found that experience, how you find it as a platform, and where do you see it going? Because for me, Like if Kabila can become like the proprietary NFT creation platform for the world, which I think it genuinely has the opportunity to become in partnership with Hedera, like where is that going to take the ecosystem? Are you excited about that? How are you feeling about that?
The one thing, the most success that I've seen from people building in the Hedera ecosystem is being passionate. You can talk about it in a lot of different ways. Some people say, being a true H barbarian, actually believing in the technology, but you see it coming from certain teams, and Kabila is that personified. Their team is that personified. They are so passionate and believe so much in the Hedera tech, but also what they're trying to do, that they're going to be successful, and they'll pivot to doing all kinds of different things to make sure it's successful. They have easy tools to use. It's a cakewalk going through it. Now, the first time, of course, you might need some hand holding. I had Jack there by my side, making sure that I was doing the right things. But once you've done that once, I didn't have any help going through the second mint. I did 250 initially, and then I did 25 specifically for HederaCon at Kabila's request, just to kind of show off their platform live. And that second mint, I think I had one question that I pinged one of the guys with, and it was pretty much that I had to shut down the prior mint before starting the new one, or it wasn't going to give me that option. But it's little stuff like that. But they have videos, and this was actually brought up by Greg Bell, the head of financial markets at the HBAR Foundation, one of the top dogs. He was looking at Kabila and saying how important it was that for every one of their tools, if you go to their launchpad or for their minting or whatever it is, they have videos right there on those pages that walk you through each one of those things step by step. And it's those kind of little things that I think are really important that Kabila has put in place. But then it's that they're always driving forward with new innovation, and they want to be that one-stop shop, but they're more than willing to work with other teams. Like the Galaxy World is very similar to the Kabila Plazas. Right? You can do a lot of the same stuff. Of course, I wanted to, again, spread things around, so I didn't set up the plaza and I went with the world. But they have all of those tools in house. And then I was sitting down with Manu having a beer, before we went out to dinner after HederaCon, and he was sketching out what he has planned and how interoperability in the tokenized world can work. And I don't want to give away too much, so I'm not going to kind of go into details around that. But number one, you saw the passion. You can see how much he thought through it, how much he believed in it. And when you have those kind of teams with that kind of drive, they're going to be successful.
100%. And I know them very well. And Manu actually gave us a call after we sold out. And I just thought to myself, wow, what a gesture, and then he told me about some of these features you're talking about and what they have planned, which we can't share here now. But I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, like we are in for one heck of a ride. But speaking about
before you get into the next question, him calling you, it was the same way with me. And it was all of their team members. They'd contact me however I had been talking to them before, whether it was Telegram, whether it was a DM on X or whatever. And it was like they were sharing in the success. And of course, they had their fees and all that kind of stuff. But it really felt like they genuinely were happy to see the success that I had. And it sounds like they had the same for you.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, my computer was experiencing some issues minting, which likely had nothing to do with the platform. But Manu and you spent 2 hours on the phone with me, helping me through that process. And I just thought, wow, like in what world is this? Try getting that kind of assistance in South Africa, where I'm from. You're in for a wild ride. So it was really, it really was an amazing gesture, and they're incredible. And we're looking forward to working with them more in the future, as I'm sure you are. My question was going to be, how have you found managing your community? Is it everything that you thought it would be? And like, is it taking away from your time to make content, or are you finding that it's enriching your enthusiasm and kind of getting you pumped to do so? Like, how are you really feeling about it all?
It's no question it's the latter. It has been very little added time. When you're doing something you enjoy, even if there is a little bit of added time, it doesn't feel like it's added work. But using the Galaxy World and posting it hasn't really added much. So I create the content anyway, right? I have the video. I email it to myself just to put it on Google Drive, or I just put it on Google Drive. Get that link. I download it to my phone, and then I put it on in my Galaxy world. It's not a heavy lift. It's a pretty light lift. And just throwing it on there. And, there's only, 30 some people in there right now, but, I get feedback on every single thing. And that's the other thing around, the additional mints. And you can think about that as dilution. I don't think about it that way at all, because I think there's going to be a certain amount of core H barbarians that are super passionate. That's kind of where I came up with that 5,000 number. And you want to create that network effect. So you almost don't have a choice but to, expand, right? You have to make that community a little bit bigger. So that's kind of how I see it, and I think it actually brings more value as you have some of that network effect, but also the exclusivity of just having the NFT holders being able to participate. Other things around the Galaxy world, I had something else that I was going to mention with it, but now it slipped my mind, so we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, no problem. If it comes back, you can always just remind me. But yeah, what's changed since you sold out? Like what is there anything that's different for you?
I would say nothing's really changed, except for, of course, you're nervous when you're going into a mint like that. I'm going to be just as nervous for the next mint and the mint after that, that it's not going to be successful. So once you've had that initial load taken off, there's less concern. But I guess for the next step, and this is what, jumping on that meeting with my artist is going to be, is, what are we going to do for the next mint to make it unique, but maintain with the brand? And in the meantime, make sure that we're bringing the value to the existing holders, to get, them excited for the next mint, whether they're going to mint another one themselves, or whether they are going to advocate for others to join the community, how that's all going to look. And it's a fun process. The first mint was a fun process. And of course, there's going to be more uncertainty around that. It almost feels like now is when the real work starts. Now I have to make sure that token gated world is living up to the standards that I had envisioned for it in the beginning. That's going to be the focus, that coming up with the art, coming up with additional value. And I don't want to throw out there what I have planned to be one of the first things that I would like to do to kind of bring some of that additional value, but hopefully the artist could pull it off.
I'm shocked to hear that they're only like 30 odd people in there so far. I mean, the way I see it is, let's say we weren't on this call right now, and we don't know one another. And I think to myself, wow, well, Brandon, he knows the team at Galaxy. I want to get Galaxy on my podcast. Let me hop into his, private world and be like, hey,
Sure.
Brandon, can you intro me to Galaxy? It's just such a no-brainer. Why do you think that? I mean, obviously some people just
I
bought
could be
so
wrong.
that
Let
they
me
could-
look at how many people are in the world, because I could be off. Yeah, no, it's 35. No, because
Wow.
I'm actually not surprised at that at all, because how many people bought multiple NFTs? A fair amount of them, probably. So if you take the 275 total that are floating around there, you could probably cut that to a third. So you're looking at under 100. And then for them to actually make it into the world, there's going to be a fair amount of them that just wanted to support me, period, or are just NFT creators, not necessarily wanting to jump in a world and go through that. But it's my job then, once you've created that, to entice people into it. And I don't know if you've seen some of the posts, but I'll say things like, hey, I just posted this to the Galaxy world. Don't worry, it's going to be in the weekly update. But if you want to get early access to it, you can go ahead and jump into the world. And then I put the link for that. But just like a lot of Web3 things, there are barriers to it. I mean, you have to mess around with your recovery phrase, and they have security aspects to Galaxy because it is a wallet. So, it kicks you out every once in a while and you have to sign back in. So there are some challenges around that. It's going to be up to me and Galaxy to make sure that people feel value to jump in. I actually think that's a pretty good number to get in there right off the bat, considering how many NFTs there were. I'm actually happy with it, and the engagement. They're engaging in there and talking and chatting and replying to to the content that I put out. So yeah, I'm happy with it right now, but I want to at least double that with the next mint. Get a few more in there, maybe get up into the 40s. Before that next mint, and then double that from there, and then it just grows over time. Hopefully we'll have a few thousand people in that world by the time this is all said and done, interacting and everything else. That's kind of what my goal is, to have 5,000 NFTs out there. There's plenty of people that might hold multiple NFTs, and maybe 2 or 2,500 people are actually in the world engaging. So that feels like the right numbers to me.
I don't want to grate this topic because, but in a way, you keep talking about adding value, and I'm thinking to myself, Brandon, like, you have so much value already because you know everyone in the Hedera ecosystem, and like, if people realize that you are a gateway into the Hedera ecosystem and that one of those NFTs is a pass to a private chat with you, like, that's enough value. I really feel that it's almost toxic, this idea of like, we have to create value when we make NFTs. I put, like, it feels toxic to me. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, when I'm saying bringing value, and it has become almost cliche, what is the utility? And it's like, well, this is almost like a payment for past work, right? The efforts that I've put into the ecosystem already. And I make it clear in the white paper that I'm not promising anything in addition, right? The NFT is the NFT. I'm trying to do fun things around it. But when I say bring value, it's more about trying to realize that vision of Kabila and Galaxy, and realizing that value, and then bringing value to the entire community. Like, all of the content that I create, that I put in this world, I'm going to get out there. It's going to come a few days later in the weekly update, or it's going to be put out in some other capacity, because I'm not going to limit any of this stuff. I want to, my goal has been and always will be to represent the HBAR holder, number one, and number two, shout from the rooftops everything that's happening in the Hedera ecosystem. So that's always going to be the main way that I'm going to bring value. So when I'm saying, bring value for the NFTs, things like that, it's more about realizing that the visions of these teams that see the potential for tokenized ecosystems, tokenized communities, and things like that.
Yeah, I wish more people could get behind that, because that's the real value. Like, the real value isn't, I guess, a Galaxy world is value in itself, because that's what facilitates it. But I don't know. I guess mainly what I meant is that this idea that we need to add utility, which people view as value, is toxic rather than value itself. The value is not toxic,
Sure.
but it's like this idea of utility that I think is super toxic. I don't know if you want to kind of answer that one.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think the point is, and this goes for a lot of different entities out there. I think Hedera, when you create something from scratch, and it's a lot more difficult when you're talking about this kind of art that my artist created, because it takes him significant amount of time, even though he's leveraging the latest tools with AI and everything else. It does take a fair amount of effort. I think people that spin up, especially fungible tokens, that is so easy. And then you just have this thing that, if you can explain a vision, can bring in a lot of capital, meme coins and things like that. But it all goes back to HBAR and things like that. The people that are willing to give up their capital to allow you to realize that vision, and we can go all the way back to HBAR and Hedera, they have to be almost treasured, right? Because that's what capitalism is all about. People using their own skills to create value, create capital, and then transferring that into something they think is going to bring even more value. And it's almost sacred in my book, considering how many people have been lifted out of poverty with capitalism. That flow is very important. So if you create one of these tokens and you're taking capital from people, that has to be treated with reverence. Almost. And I think that sometimes people look at it and it's a little bit too easy to do that. And it can be very difficult in some situations. But, I really think that you should be careful when you're doing that, and make sure that you're treating that capital that you receive with a lot of respect.
100%. And of course, the market wasn't in our favor recently for both of our launches, and so I wouldn't say that people are stupid in any way. It's completely opt-in, as you put it. Like it's up to them whether or not they want to invest in something. And I don't think it's as easy as some people might think to like completely coerce people as if they're like these fools. And yet we do have a lot of scams in the industry, and some projects somehow raise millions and millions of dollars for things that never come into fruition. And it's sad to see.
Right.
But that's why I like this almost like honed in individual creative idea that we're seeing on Hedera, where like you, Brandon, can tokenize your brand yourself. And that is so
That's right.
unreal. And what's so cool is that like the mundane, and not to say your podcast is mundane in any way, it's just educational, as we said, but it can become vivid through this idea of art now. And like, how do you see that transforming? Because I think that's super underrated. When I think about Hedera and the fact that you can actually do that now because of the utility. So like utility is toxic in the sense that people are always asking for utility, but they don't even know what utility they're asking for at the end of the day. But the real utility is that, like, I think that what a really a shared world is, it's like, it's something incredible. It's something exciting. It's something beautiful. It's something vivid, colorful, and that requires creativity and art. How does that make you feel about the future of Hedera and Web3?
Yeah, so I mean, I can go back to what that process looked like of creating these NFTs or creating the art for these NFTs. I said what I picture is these, okay, the H Barbarian is something that's owned by the entire community. And I pictured the H Barbarians being warriors from all over the world. And of course, I wanted to tie that brand together. So I was like, can we do it with some bullhorns? And then the artist started to come out with what you see now with it, and you can feel like with it, like all feel like they have their own stories. The warriors are exactly what you would expect from a badass that's floating around out there that you wouldn't want to mess with. And I have a crush on half the the women bull barbarians that we got out there. So, um, yeah, that the allowing and having artists that can take a vision like that and bring it to reality, and where you feel a connection with the characters themselves and feel that they have a story, or a story that's going to move forward in the future. It was just such a cool experience, and I think everybody could do that.
What inspired the artistic direction again? It's very Lord of the Rings-esque, I must say.
Yeah, well, it was just that I had always thought about, actually before H Barbarian, when we were in 2018 trying to figure out what the Hedera community was going to be called. We talked about Hedarians, we talked about Lehman's Legion, and it kind of all landed on H Barbarian. And I had a graphic designer that I knew at the time come up with a character for Lehman's Legion, and it was a legionnaire, a Roman legionnaire, or something like that. And I saw that, and then I thought about, well, who were they fighting against? Or who were they going up against? What was like the barbarians, the Germanic tribes, or whatever? And then you think about Vikings and warriors from Native Americans or wherever, and that's what we tried to do. We tried to find these characters from different places, Asian influence and African influence, and all these different places. But they're all H barbarians. They're all tied to this common theme of. And I have to throw a shout out to Coinman, the H Barbarian, who was the first one who I believe pushed the H Barbarian theme. And we've ended up with some of the coolest, or one of the coolest names for the Hedera community that you can think of. And I just wanted to kind of bring that to life a little bit. And that's where the Bulbarians kind of came from.
There is a lot of pride, I suppose, behind holding one of those and like identifying with that. So I can really relate to that. Speaking
Sure.
of which, like what kind of people are there in your Galaxy world?
It's those core H barbarians, people that I knew that wanted to jump in there right away. It's the ones. it's the early adopters, right? When you look at the curve of early adopters, or what is it, innovators, and then early adopters, and then early users, and then the majority, and early majority, late majority, all that kind of stuff. The chart of adoption that I'm talking about. These are the innovators and early adopters that are the first ones to go out, and when they see something like Galaxy or Kabila, they want to be the first ones to go out and try and use it. So those are the crew that are in there first, and the ideas to move that on to the early majority. So as other people come into our community, start collecting NFTs, that some of those other people want to test out the waters in something like Galaxy and try it out.
Before we wrap it up, has anything like surprised you about that space or that world? Like, has it gone exactly as you thought it would, or has anything interesting or unusual happened through this process?
Um, well, I guess the first thing, and I guess this isn't surprising, but it was how engaged people were right off the bat by posting their H barbarians. These are the ones that I got. That was the first thing that kind of got posted there, and it made the world kind of, because the art itself is kind of beautiful. It made the world itself kind of come alive. So you can kind of scroll through it and see all these different characters. And it made me, because I'm always looking for content for my own podcast, it made me happy and proud to be able to grab those screenshots or screen records of what this world looks like, to have all those characters pop up. That was one of the coolest things that I saw right off the bat.
And I just so happened to see that exact post, and I thought to myself, wow, look at all that hype. So it just goes to show
Yeah,
how valuable something like that is. Brandon, it's been a
sure.
pleasure. I know that you have plenty to do. What would you like to leave our and your community with today?
I think it's your message around collaboration, and that's what, being in my position and covering all the different parts of the Hedera space, it puts me in a unique position, but anybody can do it by just engaging with the community and whatever you want. It's hard to be in the Hedera space and not want to build. I've said that over and over again. We didn't even talk about Twigital, one of my companies, but I'm involved with so many different entities, from Karate Combat and Galaxy and Kabila and Twigital, my company, and Earthlings. But you can keep going down the line. And it's important to jump on the spaces where people are having these conversations and saying, how can I bring value to these other teams with what I have envisioned, and how can they bring value to what I'm trying to build? Because it's kind of that network effect when we get all of these brilliant builders working together, where we can really create some beautiful things, and it takes Hedera to the next level as well. So that's what I'm going to leave on.
Sounds a little bit like a hash graph, Brandon.
I think you're right, right on the head.